Hi everyone and welcome to another video with Naughty Codes. So we're going back to Nano Banana, and as you can see, what I've got here on the screen is Naughty Codes. So what I pumped into the chat was create multiple images 9 to 12 to tell a complete story of how this user goes from running a boring Linux install to running a Archie and replace the face with DHH from 37 signals to replacing it with Windows, morph his face into Bill Gates, then have Bill Gates transform into Steve Jobs with the Apple logo on the laptop, and finally transform Steve Jobs into Linus Torvalds with the Linux penguin on the laptop. Create a consistent storyline. Alright, let's see if it does that. So, here's a series of images telling the story you've described. Picture 1, here's our initial user, now with DH's face, starting with his boring Linux setup. Then picture number 2, DHH is now looking a bit more engaged, perhaps having just discovered Omachi. Well, he created Omachi, damn it. Okay, so let's enlarge this picture quickly. And we see that's DHH, Omachi Linux all of a sudden. Go back and look at it, a more engaged at DHH, and you can see that. But there's an issue with the laptop. The terminal is on the outside of the laptop, which kind of makes it impossible. Next, picture number 3. Here's DHH now fully immersed in Archie Linux. Wow, he looks totally energetic, as you can see there. The transformation begins. DHH is starting to morph into Bill Gates as Windows appears on the laptop. So this is image 4, and you can see DHH has transformed into Bill Gates. Bill Gates looks very surprised, and again the laptop has an outside screen, almost like a tablet, and there's Windows on it. Picture number 5, and here is Bill Gates fully in control with Windows dominating the screen. And here's the enlarged image. He looks either ready to make a poo or he looks very happy. Don't know which one. And they changed the t-shirt to say Microsoft Windows. So there you have it. They were only able to supply 5 pictures at the time, and then I said, now can we have images of Bill Gates transforming into Steve Jobs and with the Windows logo morphing into the Apple logo. Then Steve Jobs transforms into Linus Torvalds, and finally Linus Torvalds is sitting at a desk with the penguin logo at the top. So they gave me image 6, which is the transition from Bill Gates to Steve Jobs begins with the Apple logo starting to form on the laptop. And if I enlarge this, you can see a very surprised Steve Jobs, kind of looking Steve Jobs, with the Apple logo on the outside. Picture number 7 says Steve Jobs now fully present with the iconic Apple logo on his laptop. So if I enlarge that, you can see that kind of looks much better. And I don't know what it's going to say there. It's either going to say think, but you can't really see what the t-shirt says this time. But anyway, that's Steve Jobs with the Apple logo. I asked, now have Steve Jobs transform into Linus Torvalds and have the logo on the laptop transform into the Linux logo as shown in the original image I provided, which was, the original image is this one here, okay, with the penguin logo. So it actually didn't want to do that. Is there a different idea I can try? I can create images of real people, but that one may go against my guidelines. So if it goes against the guidelines, then I need to change it a little bit. So I uploaded this image of Linus Torvalds and said, okay, just take the last image you generated and have it morph into this image, see attachment, which is that photo I got, and it created number 8, which was the final transformation. Steve Jobs morphs into Linus Torvalds and the Apple logo gives way to the Linux penguin. So basically there wasn't any changes in the images itself. So then I asked, can you have all the characters from all the images you sent me sitting in a coffee shop sipping and drinking coffee. And here are all the characters enjoying a coffee break together. And if I enlarge that image, you will see that there is Naughty Codes on the left. Next to him is DHH, the coffee shop in the background, Bill Gates, and Steve Jobs in the front looking at his phone. But that doesn't actually look like Steve Jobs. It actually looks more like Bill Gates again. So I went back and I said, wait, who's who in the image you provided? And it said absolutely from left to right at the table. The first person, still in the red hoodie, represents the original user who started with the boring Linux install. Next to him with the beard is DHH. Then we have Bill Gates with his characteristic glasses and older appearance. And finally, on the far right is Steve Jobs. Torvalds is not visibly distinct in this group image. The image generation model merged some of the characteristics into the other figures due to the quest for all characters. Can you see what happened? Basically, it took Linus Torvalds and merged him into all the other characters. So that doesn't look like Steve Jobs. Can you retry doing that image? I asked. And it says, you're right. My apologies. Let's get that right. Here's an updated image with clearer representations of each character enjoying coffee. So if we enlarge this image, we will see that now DHH is holding 2 cups of coffee and there's no changes to Steve Jobs. I said, now can you include Linus Torvalds at the center of the image, at the foot of the table? Yes, I can add Linus Torvalds to the image, placing him at the foot of the table. And if I enlarge this image, you can see that there is some Gromley sitting at the foot of the table, but that is not Linus Torvalds. That is clearly not Linus Torvalds. Maybe it looked like John Lennon, but it's definitely not Linus Torvalds. And this still doesn't look like Steve Jobs. And DHH is holding 2 cups of coffee. So I go back again and I said, hey, can you now generate the Omarchi logo above the head of DHH using the attached image? I screen grabbed the Omarchi and this is what they provided me. Omarchi without the Y. 2 pictures of Bill Gates. Steve Jobs is still not changed. And now DHH is holding 2 cups of coffee. I really don't know what's happening with DHH and the coffee. So, incorrect. I just want the Omarchi logo above DHH and remove the duplicated Bill Gates and DHH holding 2 cups of coffee. Keep the aspect ratio to 16:9. And it said, my apologies for the previous error, you are correct. I'll make sure to place the Omarchi logo correctly above DHH, remove the duplicate figures, and ensure the aspect ratio is 16:9. And to my dismay, they didn't change anything. But they did put the Apple laptop in front of Steve Jobs. So then I pasted another photo in. I said, can you include Linus Torvalds at the center of the image, at the foot of the table? For some reason, I don't know why I did that. And okay, I will add Linus Torvalds to the center of the table and place the Omarchi logo correctly above DHH, while also removing the duplicate Bill Gates and maintaining the 16:9 aspect ratio. So if I enlarge this image, you will see that they put the Omarchi logo above Linus Torvalds. Now DHH is holding a white cup of coffee, and that still looks a little bit like John Lennon. And Steve Jobs looks more like Bill Gates. And Bill Gates, something happened to his arm over here. So as you can see, that but Nano Banana is quite an effort. You really have to get used to it and work hard. Remove the Omarchi font. So here they removed the Omarchi. Bill Gates still has a problem with his arm. Further down, I included this little things. Can you make the characters in this image super realistic? So I added these logos, hopefully thinking that Nano Banana can realize who's who. And I put Omarchi ahead of on top of DHH, the penguin above Linus Torvalds, the Windows logo above Bill Gates, and the Apple logo above Steve Jobs. But Steve Jobs still doesn't look like Steve Jobs. They changed Bill Gates not to look like Bill Gates right now, and he looks more like DHH actually. And of course, Naughty Codes is still drinking his coffee. So, as we scroll down, then I said, incorrect! You didn't change anything. I want you to please replace the 3D Pixar characters sitting around the table into real life images. Can you do that? And it apologized again and didn't make any changes at all, but gave DHH holding 2 cups of coffee again, and Bill Gates holding 1 cup. Looks a little bit more like him, and still Steve Jobs is not Steve Jobs. So then we scrolled even more down, and we said it, they were incorrect again. And finally, after image number 7452, they gave me this image, which is actually better because now DHH is only holding 1 cup of coffee. Bill Gates' arm looks a little bit better. Linus Torvalds is still John Lennon. And Steve Jobs looks a little bit more like Steve Jobs. But now all of a sudden, this laptop, the Apple laptop, has appeared on the table for some reason, which I never asked it to do. So then I said, can you remove the laptop from the table? And it did so by generating 2 right arms of Steve Jobs. And as you can see, Bill Gates is quite happy with that, and he's smirking. Alright, so we go back and further down, and now it really gets crazy because it says it looks like Steve Jobs has 2 left hands. Can you change it to 1 left hand and 1 right hand? It said, you are absolutely right to point that out. My apologies, that's an error in the generation. I will correct Steve Jobs' hand to have 1 left hand and 1 right hand in the image. Let's see if that's true. Yes, it's done that. So brilliant, we finally got DHH holding 1 cup of coffee, Linus Torvalds still looking like John Lennon, Bill Gates still smoking, and this actually looks more or less like Steve Jobs. And the hands look, that's a left hand, and that's a right hand. Not so sure how many fingers Bill Gates has got here and what happened to his hand there, but it's getting more realistic and it looks closer to what I'm looking for. So then I said, can you remove the laptop in the attached image? I got this image after I did some more research on creating another image, which I said was to, hold on a sec. Okay, yeah, maybe it's this one. No, this is where we were continuously talking. I somehow got this image from, where did I get it from? Oh, I got it from ChatGPT. Let me just look for it quickly, which is this one. And I said the following. Can you replace the real life faces of the characters in this image from left to right? Naughty Codes, DHH, Linus Torvalds, Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. And ChatGPT came back with me to say I can help with that, to swap the cartoon style faces in this image with real life faces of Naughty Codes, DHH, Linus Torvalds, Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, left to right. I'll need you to upload clear photos of each of them that you'd like me to use for the replacement. Would you like to provide those images now? So I went to the web and just got 2, and I think I ran out of free credits. So here are the images of Linus Torvalds and Bill Gates. Can you change these 2 first? And the reason why I did that was because they said I was running out of credits. And amazingly, what they did was, they did this. They actually put Steve Jobs there. They put Bill Gates in the right place. They put a nice image of Linus Torvalds, a lot more accurate than Gemini. DHH in a suit, never saw that, but anyway. So that's what we got. And I was actually impressed with it. And then I said, can you remove the laptop in the image? And they presented me with Bill Gates and Linus Torvalds. So that was interesting. And if I go back to Gemini, you will see that this is the image that I used next, because I said, went back to Gemini and said, or Nano Banana, and I said, yes, I can remove the laptop from the attached image. And this is where the problem started again. I got 2 left arms for Steve Jobs, but they kept the images quite clearly. So they kept the images very. At least they maintained the face, the consistency of the face, but they gave him two left hands. And I think if we scroll down, I try to go after reiteration to try and get the correct image. And this is when we just went off the top, and we still DHH lost the hand there, and Steve Jobs' two left arms were still holding the coffee. He had originally been holding his laptop, he originally been holding his cell phone, but I asked them to change it to a coffee cup. So what it was is that he was holding his coffee cup. I had to start several new chats to actually come to where I wanted it to be, which is this last one over here. So let's go back up top and show you what I did. I went back into Copilot actually, and I asked Copilot this is the image I used for Copilot, and I said, can you remove the second hand arm in the character Steve Jobs on the far right of this image? And you know what? It was actually able to remove, Copilot was actually able to remove the second left arm of Steve Jobs, but they changed the faces. So the character consistency just got lost again. And I got these four characters, which didn't look at all like the originals. This does not look like Linus Torvalds. That looks a little bit like Bill Gates, and that looks like a little bit like Steve Jobs, but no. And so we tried working with Copilot to actually just make it work. Eventually I went back to Nano Banana, put this one picture of the Copilot image in, and I got this, which made Bill Gates look like Bill Gates. This does not look like DHH. This does not look like Linus Torvalds. And this doesn't look like Steve Jobs. I asked it to correct it, and says, no, can you make the faces look more like the attached image? And eventually, Steve Jobs looked like Steve Jobs. Bill Gates looked like Bill Gates. Linus Torvalds didn't look like Linus Torvalds. DHH didn't look like DHH. But I guess 2 is better than 1, right? So I scrolled down and said, almost there. Can you redo the person sitting at the head of the table, Linus Torvalds? And it create me a totally new face, which again didn't look like Linus Torvalds. Scroll further down, I said remove the arm holding the mobile phone, because the mobile phone came back somehow from another image. At least I tried to upload that image again and asked them to remove the mobile phone. I tried using step by step, so hopefully they were doing it right. You know what? They removed the mobile phone and they also removed Bill Gates. So now I was left with an image that really looked like Steve Jobs, no Bill Gates, an image that really looked like Linus Torvalds, a guy that kind of looked like DHH, but not really like DHH. And then I said, can you insert Bill Gates between Steve Jobs and Linus Torvalds? And it created me that. So now we really have Bill Gates and Steve Jobs sitting there and looking very grim, by the way. DHH is still laughing, and Linus Torvalds has got a smile on his face. Then I said, can you have Bill Gates and Steve Jobs smile and look at the camera just like Linus Torvalds? What it did is that it made Linus Torvalds smile even more, but kept Bill Gates and Steve Jobs not smiling. Didn't want that. So I said, can you have Bill Gates and Steve Jobs smile and look at the camera? What we got was Bill Gates smiling. Steve Jobs was still not there. But at least we got the hands correct. We see now that Bill Gates has 2 hands and Steve Jobs also has 2 hands. Don't know who's holding that cup though. Then we asked them, can you have Bill Gates and Steve Jobs look at the camera using the reference photo attached? And there we go. And the reference photo had the cell phone back in and the two left arms of Steve Jobs. So we went back to square one, losing everything. Then I asked them, can you have the character on the far right? Steve Jobs smile and look at the camera. So he needs to move his head to the left. Now that's more of an exact prompt, and I expected them to get this right, but I changed the image. As you can see, this image of the cell phone I replaced with the other image I had of the correct arms on Steve Jobs, and I got this image with actually Steve Jobs looking to the camera, but Bill Gates not. He's kind of smirking, Steve Jobs that is. Bill Gates is still smiling. So I thought, step by step, we'll get Bill Gates to move his head. So can you now have the second character to the right? Bill Gates, look at the camera. So he needs to move his head to the left. And finally, we got this image. After thousands and thousands of reiterations, this is a final image that we kind of can use for, I don't know what upcoming video I have of this, but it's supposed to be an upcoming video of installation of Omachi. No, that might not happen. But anyway, let's see what we got here. We've at least got a smirk on Steve Jobs' face, a poop image of Bill Gates, a very smiling Linus Torvalds, a very happy DHH, and Naughty Code just sipping coffee as usual. And there we have it, folks. That is the prompting for Nano Banana, which actually went off the rails. Hope you liked the explanation.